seated. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. You were very gracious this morning, and I enjoyed being here. And I was going to have a nice nap and relax this afternoon until he told me I was going to get back up here, and it kind of fouled up my nap. But anyway, I wrote down a few notes here of things that I didn't touch on this morning, and I just jotted them down as they came to my mind. They're in no particular order, and I don't know that I have, sir? I don't know that I have recall enough to put them in the proper sequence anyway. It's been a long time, as you know, but I will go through this list and tell you some more experiences that I had. I'd like to take a moment and pray before I do. Dear loving God, we thank you tonight. Lord, I ask that you help me to recall accurately, Lord, and to say just the way it was and not change anything, Lord, because you know I hold it important and I don't want to make a mistake. I've written this down the best I can. I ask that you come and bless it, Lord, and may I express what's on my heart. I thank you for these things. Bless this company of people, and we'll give you the praise in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. I had a sister ask me this morning if I would tell the young people and maybe the people that hadn't the opportunity to meet Brother Branham some of his characteristics and what it was like to be around him. And I've tried to jot down a few things that I was struck by, and as I get to them, I'll try to do that. Of course, the main thing that I did when I was with him was hunting, so most of them are around the hunting stories. So those of you that don't care about that'll have to bear with me, because that's just what we were doing. And so that's all I can tell you is what we did. One time I had a particular problem this day. I had a client, and usually I told him to go home, but this time I had another outfitter with me, and he had brought the client. And so I said, so Brother Branham rode with me, and this client rode with the other outfitter, and I said, what am I going to do? I think we're going to hit a lion where I'm going, and I know I was bringing you for it, and this guy thinks he's going to get it. I don't know what we're going to do. He says, I wouldn't worry about it. And so we went out there. It was a long walk. It was up by Four Peaks, right here, over here by Four Peaks. We had walked quite a while, and the dogs hit a lion, and I ran down there and looked. It was a pretty big track, and I said, oh, this is a nice lion. I said, back to the deal. What are we going to do? He says, just let them work it. And he says, we'll enjoy it. I don't have to kill it anyway. So, anyway, the dogs worked this line, and they started getting better and better, and I knew they were going to catch it. I mean, it was sounding good. I liked the sound of it, you know. And I said, hey, they're going to jump him right in that canyon. So they spilled over this lip of the canyon, and this other guy said, is that good? I said, yeah, that's pretty good. So Brother Branham asked me the funniest question. Here I am. I got real nice lion dogs, and I'm proud of how broke they are. You know, they don't chase deer. They don't chase all these things. And he says, do your dogs ever run coyote? And I said, well, I've broken most of them off of it, but yeah, all of them had to be broken off coyote pretty much. Why do you ask? He said, I just wanted to know if they ran them. So they went off in this canyon at which I knew we were about to jump this lion, and I looked over on the other bank, and there's a coyote's running out of the bottom of that canyon. He heard the dogs too, and so he ran up, and some of my dogs looked over to him. and they started chasing him. And I was embarrassed, of course, but it took the pressure off. We didn't have to waste the lion, with this regular client, So my dogs chased the coyote, so I cut them off. I had the angle on them, and I cut it off, and I started catching my dogs. And I was young then, and I knew I could run. And I caught those dogs, and I was giving a whipping, and Brother Branham came up to me, and he says, that's enough, don't you think? I was getting into it, because I don't think they were supposed to run it. They just ran it to solve our problem. And he says, I think that's enough. I said, okay. And so I kind of let up on him. But that guy says, that other outfitter, he says, man, I thought sure we had that lion. Anyway, I thought it was kind of a funny way to get out of my problem, And he knew before. See, he knew before what was going to happen, and I hadn't an idea. It was just something that I wanted to write down and tell you about. On the tape that Brother Branham talks about the Jack Mormon, who was my friend. He was a government hunter. Anyway, one day we were standing around. It was the day after we had the discussion I told you about this morning about the dog versus the horse. Well, Jerry came in, and he was a man of few words. In fact, he wasn't even very easy to get along with. He was just a real good lion hunter. He wasn't much of a, he didn't have any personality, but he was a nice guy. I mean, he was a good dog. No, he wasn't a nice guy. He was a good dog trainer. But anyway, he really understood a hound. He just didn't understand people, which I understand that too. But it's anyway. So this Jerry comes up and he said, Dawson, does your friend ever help people out like this? I said, what do you mean? I said, yeah, but I usually don't bother him with stuff. What do you got? What are you talking about? He said, do you know Val? I said, yeah. Well, Jerry's father had passed away, and he had a younger brother. And his dad had asked him before he left, because he knew Jerry saw no value in education at all, and didn't care about it. But Val, his father had wanted Val to have an education, and he was a very devout Mormon. Not Jerry, but his younger brother. And I don't think Jerry ever went to church, ever. Except to his funeral, a couple of funerals for his children. He never went to church that I knew about. But Val was very devout, and he wanted to go to BYU. Well, it took a lot of money, and Jerry wasn't making much. And so I told him I'd help him. And we'd take some extra lion hunters on the side. It was not illegal at the time for a government hunter to guide on the side, and so I helped him. I said, we'll just take 2 or 3 hunters a year and help pay your tuition, and I'll do it that way. So Val got very sick, and he was in the hospital. It's a very small hospital. If you're ever in the town of Salina, Utah, it's just a little brick building, a little rock building. It's, 4 or 5 rooms. And he said he's going to have an operation in the morning. And he said, I was just wondering if he'd pray for him. I was shocked. This man didn't even like preachers, And at first, he got after me for bringing a preacher up there the year before. And so he said, will you talk to him? I said, sure. So Brother Branham came up, and we were walking around out by some trees, and I said, we walked away from the house. I said, Jerry's brother, Val, he's in the hospital for an operation in the morning. And he asked me if you ever prayed out here like this. He said, you go have him go down to the hospital and bring him right now. Well, he was in a smock and everything. They says, you can't take him out. He says, I didn't ask you. Where is he? I'm the one paying him. I'm his guardian. I'll take him out if I want to. They said, well, he's already prepped for the operation, so I don't care. So he brings him out. It's about 3 or 4 blocks down there, and he takes him out, and Brother Branham takes his hat off, and he prays a simple prayer. So he turned around, and I followed him away, and he said, tell him not to let him cut on him. He said, he's healed. And so I turned around and I said, Jerry, don't let him operate. He doesn't need it. He said, no, wait a minute, are you sure? I said, I'm sure, Jerry. I'm real sure. I said, I'm sure enough that I can tell you right now, they won't find it when they look. Tell them to look first. Approach it that way. So he went back, took him back in, and he said, whatever you do, I'm not authorizing this. I know I signed it, tear it up. You have him examined by another doctor in the morning and get some new x-rays. Do not touch him. So the next morning, they couldn't find anything. So they turned him loose. And so Jerry came up to me and he said, you know, it works. He said, it works, you know that? I said, yeah, it does. And I said it thousands of times, Jerry. I said, it works a lot, you know. He says, oh, it works, you know. So anyway, so Val came back and went to BYU. And one day he was in I'm going to call it the inner sanctum, and he was in a library that the books could not be checked out. They had to be read right there and put right back under this glass case. And he was reading where a heretic got kicked out of the Mormon church. And there's a book called The Mormon Word of God. And on page 55, it says, in the last days, my servant William Branham will come down the West Coast, healing, preaching, and doing miracles in my name. And Val testified to me it was in that book in the BYU library. And they kicked the man out for being a heretic. So anyway, Val himself told me that. And by the way, Val is the superintendent of the largest coal mine in Utah today. He's very well, been very successful, and he's done a real good job. He's not an old dumb lion hunter, you know. He's done really well, and he's still healthy. That's a long time. One time, we were at this Strawberry Lodge, and as I told you this morning, it was my custom to have a client in, run the week, and then pay my bill. Well, my client was there about 3 days, and I ran up a bill, and I didn't pay him because I couldn't charge the guy because I told him to go home, so I didn't have any money. So I had zero money. I think I had $27, and I owed my bill there. And so Lester comes around real discreet, and he says, hey, Tina says you didn't pay up on the last client. I said, Tina's right. She's exactly right. He says, well, when you gonna collect off this guy? He called Brother Branham this guy, you know. He said, you're gonna collect off this guy and pay them both? I says, that's not exactly, I knew I wasn't gonna charge him, so I couldn't tell him I was gonna do that. So I said, that's not exactly what I had in mind. I had in mind the next guy I'll pay all three. He says, no, that's not our deal. I want my money. In fact, you're going to pay it right now. So he sails in there to Tina. He says, print me up this. So she goes, gets me tears off this receipt, and he gives it to me. And he puts it in my pocket. Hard. He stuffs it. He said, I want it today. I said, man, you've never done this before. I've never not paid you. And I said, man, we've been friends 4 years. I don't have it. He said, you've collected, I know. And I didn't tell him anything. And I didn't tell him, it was none of his business that I wasn't going to collect this time, you know, so I didn't say anything. So I thought, man, what am I going to do? And so about 10 minutes, Brother Branham comes up to me. And I'm watching these two Frenchmen that he had fixing flats. And I wanted to make sure there was really a nail in my tire because I didn't trust him too much. And so I was checking it out, you know, because I had flats every day. And I always accused Lester of driving up that gravel road by Strawberry and throwing nails out because it was good business, you know. And I told him, I said, if I ever get a brand new nail, I'm not paying for that flat, you know. So anyway, I was watching these Frenchmen fix it. Time Brother Branham comes up and he said, let me help you out a little. I said, no, I don't need any money. He said, he said, you know, this kind of adds up. And I said, no, sir, I don't need a dime. I'm fine. He looks at me and said, well, I'd sure like to help you. I said, no, sir, it's not necessary. And he walked off, and And Lester comes up and he said, "Did he pay you?" I said, "No, he didn't pay me." He said, "Well, I heard him tell you he was going to." I said, "No, none of that's your business, Lester. You just pay. You just go run your restaurant, you know." And so pretty soon Brother Branham come back and he said, "Hey, let me help you out." I said, "Oh no, I don't need any." He said, "Well, I'd sure like to give you a little bit, at least on expenses and all." I said, "No, they're not very much, and I'll just get them." And I didn't want to tell him I didn't have any money. And so he left, and pretty soon he comes back, and he stuffed a bunch of money in my pocket. Well, I hadn't even looked at the receipt, and so I walked around the building there, and there was a little mechanic's bench, and I got that money out, and I got that receipt, and it was exactly to the penny what was written down, to the very penny. I mean, it was you know, the next guy that bought the Strawberry Lodge, he was a real nice young fellow. His name was Dennis Stutzman. And he kind of got me in a little bind because his mother inherited some money, and so she bought it. And so Lester told me, he says, "I'm moving to Camp Verde, and we're going to put in a Western store. We're tired of this." And he said, "We're selling out to this guy. His mother's got a lot of money." And he said, "They don't even know how much work they're going to have with a motel and the restaurant and the service station and the lodge and everything." And said, "We're glad to get out of it," but he said, "They'll find out." So he said, I'll just tell them what kind of deal you got, and maybe they'll just keep doing it." And finally Lester did. I had to tell him that I never charged Brother Branham, and he got used to me waiting till the second guy. But anyway, old Dennis, he found out that I hunted, and so he started going with me. Well, we caught some lions, and he got all excited, and he got the fever, and that's a bad fever, you know. People don't need to be catching that, you know. But anyway, he got raging. He wanted him some dogs. And I said, "Oh, you don't want any dogs. You know, it's not as easy as you think it is, and it looks easy when you go out there and there's a lion up there and just a few dogs, but you don't. It's hard work, and they cost a lot of money." And yeah, I tried to discourage him, and the more I told him no, he wanted to do it. So he tried to buy some dogs from me. I said, "No, I'm not going to sell any dogs. And what are you going to do? Your mother can't run this place, and if you go hunting, she's already mad at me because you're not being very responsible. Every time she hated to see me come because if I came, he quit work. So she had it all to do. So I knew that she hated me, and I knew, and I didn't. I thought, man, Dennis, she don't even like for me to come, and I come up here all the time." I said, "You got me in a mess already." So, and sure enough, she was getting worse and worse, and she was getting hard to handle for me, you know. And I'm not very tolerant of women anyway, and she was just getting on my, you know, getting under my skin, and so she wasn't very nice. But I kind of understood, you know, but I just couldn't quite understand enough. And so Brother Branham came up, and I said, "Boy, I don't know if we'll get served tonight." So I told him the deal. I said, "Well, I don't know if she'll serve us last. She'll be kind of rude, and she'll be real terse with her remarks." So he says, "Is that right?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, the boy wants to go hunting, you know, and he don't want to do his job. He wants to get irresponsible, and I don't know how to solve the deal." So we came in, and she come over to take the order, and she stands like this. I'm right here, and she goes, "Can I have your order?" "What do you want?" You know, that's how it was. And Brother Branham looked at it, and he said, "Ooh, oh." So she goes off and gets her stuff started, and she come back, and Brother Branham, he tapped my knee under the table. He says, "Evening, ma'am." She said, "What do you do? All these guys he brings in are rich. What do you do?" you know, and he looked and he said, "Well, I'm not rich, man. Ma'am, I'm a minister of the gospel." She looked at him, you know, says, you know, I used to go to church. He said, you used to? That doesn't sound very good. She said, yeah, I'm ashamed of that. And so she sails off the kitchen, waits on a bunch of other people. Pretty soon she comes over there, and he said, where'd you go to church? What town was that? She says, well, that was in Indiana. He said, well, I'm from Indiana. She said, no kid. Pretty soon she's sitting down with us, and then pretty soon she's crying. And she gave her heart to the Lord, and she was super nice to me. She was so nice. And then now every time I come up there, she tried to ask me, when's your friend coming back? And so just in 5 or 10 minutes, he had her just fine. And she was not too good. I mean, it wasn't going to get better for me, I can tell you that, because I wasn't helping either. Anyway, just a little soft word turneth away wrath, you know, and those other ones don't. They don't turn away wrath, you know. We have to learn slow sometimes, you know. But anyway, what a wonderful example. I mean, and he was tender, and he was nice to her, you know, and he was thoughtful. And he showed empathy, and she knew it. It was genuine, you know. He really cared about her. He really cared about her predicament, you know. And it showed. It showed, you know. You know, I was riding along with Brother Branham, and I had done something wrong. I've told you before, I wasn't professing to be a Christian. And I had done something bad. And I was wondering how I'm going to face Brother Branham when I see him again. It was troubling. I wanted to see him, but I was afraid. And I knew that he knew, and I didn't know what to do. So I'm driving down the road, and if you've ever gone across from Page to Kanab, there's a place called Pariah Canyon. And I got so under conviction I couldn't drive. And I had a huge burden that I couldn't bear. It was so heavy, I couldn't sit there. And I couldn't see to drive. I couldn't think. Excuse me. The pressure was so great, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I pulled over to the side of the road. And I had to get out. I got out of the truck. I walked around and I hung over the right-of-way fence, several feet over there. And Brother Branham opened the truck door, but he didn't say anything. Just opened it. And I sat there with this burden, and guilt, and conviction. And he said, that wasn't your fault. He said, that was a trap, and you were weak. And the Lord will forgive you if you ask him. I apologize. You know, I feel the same feelings again. They're so real to me. I feel it anew, and I can't help it. He said if you'll ask him, he'll lift that burden. Now just think, he said he'll take that burden. And I sat right there on that fence, and I talked to the Lord about it, and I confessed it out loud.
ask him to forgive me, and just a ton of weight lifted. And I walked around, got in the truck, and I drove on. And he talked to me about 5 or 10 minutes about it. He just knew how to deal with every situation that you came to. And he did it so gentlemanly and so soft and so thoughtful and tender. And yet he could be stern, you know, or yet he could be gentle. But he didn't tell me how rotten I was. And he didn't beat me up about it. I was already hurt. I already knew. And sometimes I wonder if we aren't harsh on each other when we each know when we're wrong, and we know when we're bad, and our children know when they're bad, and we don't have to just keep on and hammering it on them. If we could be like that to our children and be more understanding and more and show that love and not spite, you know. And I thought, you know, he could have railed on me and I would have had to stand there and take it because he would have been right. But he didn't do it that way. And so I just wanted to tell you, and I mean, I wasn't proud of what I did or anything, but I've been, you know, I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and that was one of them. And anyway, it meant a lot to me the way he dealt with it. It meant a lot to me. One day I want to tell you about one of the most enjoyable days I ever remember in my life. It seemed like it was so simple and nothing was exciting, and I enjoyed it so much, and what a privilege. And if I tell you, you're going to be envious of this. You're going to be envious because it was a wonderful thing. We had gone to Sunset, just he and I, and we were camped out in the wash, and he couldn't go up by the rock in his station wagon, but he had driven from Tucson, and he had a sleeping bag in it, and we went ahead and parked it when it got rough and got in my truck, and he'd found well, I don't know if he had found it. He told me about a bobcat we were going to find, and I don't know if he'd found it earlier or if he just knew it was there. You never knew, you know. But we went up there and we trailed this bobcat, and we put it in a tree. And we were talking and making too much noise. Well, who am I to tell him we shouldn't talk and we should shut up and slip up quietly? I would never tell him that, you know. I wasn't my place to tell him. You got to remember, I was a kid, you know. I was young. I was a young man. And I was of all things that I can say, of my many mistakes I did make, one I didn't make. And I've been happy. I was very respectful. At least I had reverence for him. Very. And I was careful about what I said and what I did, because you couldn't help it with the feeling you felt. And I can't describe that, but you had an awe. There was a presence there, an aura that I can't describe, that you knew was very real. I'm not capable of putting it into words, but there was an imminence of I can't describe, but it caused you to reverence it. you knew not to abuse it or be harsh, if I may say. And so we were going up there, and I thought perhaps we were making a little much noise, but there's a lot of bobcats in the world, and so I didn't say anything. It jumped out. If some of you that have ever been to Sunset up there, Sunset Wash goes up there, and it has big red walls. And this tree, it was an ironwood tree, grew up, and the cat jumped out on the ledge and took off. Well, we had to walk a long ways to get the dogs around because the dogs couldn't climb the ledge, and we didn't hurry. We just talked, and we took the dogs around and got them back up there and started trailing this cat again. By that time, it took us an hour or so. This cat track was a little old, and they had to work it pretty hard, and so they're trailing, and it came up a real big thunderstorm, and it rained our track out because the cat track was pretty sensitive, you know, a small foot, doesn't have a lot of sand in it, and the dogs were having to work, and it was just desert, old dry sand anyway, and sagebrush. So there wasn't a lot to hold the scent. And so when it rained, I knew we had lost the cat, and I said, we might as well go back to the rig and have lunch, Brother Branham. They're not going to find that cat again, and we'll lose it. You know, it got washed out. He said, yeah, no doubt it did. So we went back. And it just started like that. We went back to the truck, and he said, well, let's go down to the station wagon. I got a sleeping bag in there, and we'll just stretch out and get dry, and I got something I want to tell you. So we went down there. We went back to the truck, put the dogs in the truck, and we drove down to the station wagon. As most of you know, the Tabernacle bought him a Ford every 3 or 4 years, and it was usually black, and he drove those Ford station wagons. And this one was the same, black, and we stretched out on this sleeping bag, and I probably hadn't, you know, well, I know I hadn't cried any. I hadn't never wet an eye probably in years. And I was too hard, and I was crusty and everything. And I can tell you that Brother Branham told me his life story for 3.5 hours. And I cried from the beginning to the end. I don't know how to tell you how wonderful it was, because I've heard it on tape, I've read the books, and I've never heard it all put together like this. I heard and it was such a delight. I just loved it. I don't know how he had the patience to do that for me, but it's been one of the highlights, and it was, you know, it's all I can tell you, that it was just wonderful to me. It was a privilege, and I just loved it. And I didn't know most of it. I hadn't read all the things I've read now. At that point in time, I only had a dozen tapes and a few books, you know. And so I had no way of knowing. And most of that I didn't know, and I was touched by it. And then I really saw the suffering that he went through and the pain that built that character, you know. And sometimes Brother Jim, Ed, and I were talking today, you know. It's a funny thing, but there's some of us that look back and thank the Lord for that pain and those hardships we go through. They're not fun to go through, but what do they? There's something they do to you that you don't get any other way. And you know, he had more than any of us. But we each in our own way have our burdens and our trials, and we have our things that we battle. But every one of them are for a reason, and every one of them are good for you, whether you like it or not. And I can truly say I thank the Lord for all of my hard battles that I've gone through, because I consider them a blessing to me. And if they changed my life in any way, or added to it. And anyway, I didn't know how to tell you how much I enjoyed that day, but it was just priceless to me. And he said something to me. Bear in mind now, he would talk very little about spiritual things, but he broke quite a few in. But it'd be interspersed with a lot of stories and a lot of hunting. But then he would tell me things. And we were driving along, I think it was about Black Canyon City. And he said, you know, I guess you've heard about that mess up in Canada that they're baptizing in my name. I said, no, I didn't hear about that. I said, you know, I don't get around in those circles, you know. He said, it's really hurting my ministry, and I'm going to have to get up there and straighten that out. And I'm saying, man, I'm just sitting there in my mind thinking, baptizing in his name. I hadn't heard about it, see. And he says, but you know what? They're not as far off as you think they are. I said, what do I think they are? You know, I thought they were pretty far off, you know. Anyway, it made me think a lot. And it's made me look at a lot of tapes a lot differently. But anyway, yeah, he told me they weren't as bad as I thought they were. So I want to talk to you a minute about a promise. Sometimes we make promises, and I'm not too sure we take them serious enough. Let me tell you about a promise I made and what it cost me. And I didn't think too much about it. And I think I was innocent of it, of what the results. I did not plan to break the promise. I honestly do, and I'll tell you the circumstance. Brother Branham had told me about a large lion, and we hadn't caught it yet. He had seen it in a vision. And so one day I had an old couple booked for clients, and this old gentleman, he was a nice old man, and he says, he's about my age now. And, you know, I thought he was ready for the grave, you know. But anyway, he was old, you know, and I was a kid. And he was, you know, had gray hair and all that stuff. And not much of that. And his wife was pretty old, and he wanted a book to take some pictures of a lion. I said, man, I'm your hoss. I'm the guy. Yeah, I can do it. I said, I'll catch you some lion. We'll take a lot of pictures. Well, I thought in my mind I'd probably be taking most of them myself, but I could maybe get them to some of them. So I booked them just like a hunt. I liked those better anyway. I didn't have to kill the lion. So I went up to Promontory Lookout, and we set up their camp trailer up on the rim. And some of you know where it is. And I had a real nice, pleasant morning that day, and my dogs trailed the lion down back east and dropped under the rim, got on a bunch of stuff, and finally caught this nice lion, a beautiful lion. And so I went down there and went and got him. Drove as close as I could, and I had these teeter-old people, you know, one on each arm, and I'd take them down there, and they'd take a bunch of pictures. And the lion I jumped it out so it'd get in another tree so we could get some more pictures. So I think I got it in 5 or 6 trees for him that day. And so I thought, you know, that lion might be the one in the vision. So I went and had them pay me and took them home. And they said, well, we thought we were going to stay here 5 days. I said, well, you've hired me for pictures, and you got your pictures, and I'll have another hunter here in the morning. I wanted to call Brother Branham, see, because I could catch that lion again. So I went down and put a dog on it to stay all night. I took Boots down there, and I put him on it. And I knew he'd hold him up in the tree all night. So I went back and called Brother Branham. I said, maybe, you know, I don't know if that's it or not. He said, no, that's not it. He said, did it have a bunch of scars on it? I said, no, sir. I said, it was real clean. He said, that wasn't it. I said, okay, thank you. So I had to go get my dog. And he was a long ways. So when I saw Brother Branham next time, I said, well, I'll tell you what. I was over in Promontory Canyon, which is another canyon west, and I think I really did get this lion this time. I said, it was bigger than that one, had scars. He said, well, I don't know. He said, I don't know. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll promise you I won't kill him. Because usually a lion hunter, when you remember a good lion, you take your next paying guy, and that one, he's history, you know. I said, I promise you I won't go to Promontory Canyon. He said, well, that's fine. He said, but, you know, you don't have to. I said, no, I'll just let him, just in case it's him. I won't go there. So it was about 3 months later, and I was running a bear way away from there. And some way or another, this bear got into Promontory Canyon, and I got to the lip of it, and I went, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. And I got scared. I said, oh, I promised I wouldn't do this. And a drunk woman killed every one of my dogs on a coin that ran. They ran across the road chasing the bear, and she got, I don't know how you can get all of them, but she got them all. How do you do it? You know, you could get one or two. She got them all. She got all 4 of them. Killed all my dogs. And just because I went where I wasn't supposed to be, I should not have been there. And I knew it. I knew when I got there, I was scared. When I got to the lip of it, I thought, I promised the prophet I would not go here. And I did. And I got my dogs killed. And I'll tell you something, I grieved over it too. And it took me a long time to train up some more dogs. It takes a long time, a lot of work. But I took that promise too lightly, and I wasn't paying attention. I let those dogs out too close to that canyon. You know, bears can go a long ways, and they did. It did. It went right to it. Anyway, I got all my dogs killed by that drunk. And she was down there crying. I felt sorry for her. She said, I killed your dogs. I know. I see them. I just want my collars back, you know. And so she says, well, I didn't mean it. I said, well, I didn't tell her it wasn't her fault, you know. It was mine, you know. I didn't even get mad at her. What could I do, you know? She wasn't supposed to be driving, but I wasn't supposed to be there either, you know. One time, Brother Branham and I got a big, nice lion up by, it was halfway between Camp Verde and, the power plant down there, somewhere or another between Strawberry and Camp Verde. On my memory, I've been hunting in Arizona for 20 years, and some of those places get a little bit dim, but I can't remember. Calf Pen Canyon, that's where it was, Calf Pen Canyon. And we caught a real nice lion. And so we didn't measure it. So I skinned it, put it in the freezer. So the next day, these hunters came in, they had this pretty nice lion. And they measured it in front of us. And it was 9'4", you know, I remember that. It was big. But he looked at me and he said, is it big as ours? I says, no, sir. He said, I was thinking the same thing. I said, ours was a little bigger. He says, when they leave, let's measure ours. I said, all right. He says, I think ours is about 9'8". And that's what it was. When I put the tape on, it was 9'8". I thought, whoa. He said, I think ours is about 9'8". Well, how could you know? It's wadded up, you know. Oh man, we didn't think about how long it was, you know. Yeah, I think it's about 9'8", and that's exactly what it was, and that impressed me quite a bit. One day, another really fun day. It seems like it was boring. If I told you that we were going to sort guns in the duplex, sorting all of his guns to decide which ones were going to go in the new den, it doesn't sound very exciting. It was exciting. It was really fun. And I mean, he told me the story of every one of his guns. And of course, I liked that. I mean, he knew every one of them. Who gave them to him? He said, I didn't buy any of these. Every one was a gift. And now listen carefully to this. This is impressive. He says, so we're in this duplex. You remember when he rented the duplex before he moved in when they were building the den? So we have these guns all paired. He said, I'm going to put this one in here, and he tells me all these stories. So he says, well, we're working hard. Let's go to lunch. So we went down to Mexican. food in Tucson somewhere. I can't remember where. It didn't matter. But we went down to 8, and on the way down, now listen to me. He says, you know, most of those guns, it's just like UPS would pull up, and the guy would get out and hand me Seiko Finbear 270 from Sweden, and it would, Finland, from Finland. And he said, and it would be from a brother who loves you, and it would be anonymous. And he said, most of them like that, sort of like that. So we went on and ate, and we came back. And he said, what was that pulled up in front? Well, you couldn't hear what pulled up in front. We were in the back, you know. I said, I don't know, I'll go out and look. The UPS guy gets out, and he brings me a box that's obviously a rifle, and he says, Bill Branham. I said, yes, sir, I'll sign for it. He said, we opened it up. It was a Seiko Finbear 270, and it was anonymously signed from a brother in Finland. He told me that 3.5 hours before it got delivered, exact to the description. It was even UPS. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I sit there. I couldn't wait to get it open. I knew it was. I knew it was going to be one. I knew, and he didn't have any. He didn't have any of those in there. It was unbelievable to me. I was exhilarated, you know. I couldn't wait. And he looked at me and he said, they think I don't know who's in it. So, I was at, I know how he confused me one day. He confused me. You know, I'm not even trying to figure out mysteries or anything, and I don't know about anything. I like some stuff simple, you know, and he starts telling me, he gives me a walk down Sunset, and the rocks were fresh. The rocks were fresh. And he showed them to me. They had just come down, and oh man, destruction. Those trees were leveled off, and we're walking down there, and I knew how that had to sound loud. I saw where it was torn off, and all these tri-colored rocks from this big to this big were all over the place, like a pyramid. It was unbelievable. And I'm just almost speechless anyway. And he takes a little rock, and he throws it up, and he said, talking about this dragon whipping its tail and causing destruction, and I was all confused, and so I didn't know what to do. I just left it alone, you know. I went about the dragon's tail and stuff. And so, you know, I felt pretty ignorant, you know, which I was, and so anyway, the next day I got on a Greyhound bus. I don't remember where I was going. But I went on this Greyhound bus, and there was a paper sitting there. And I picked it up, and Alaska, man, it was all in the headlines and pictures and big devastation. I knew where the dragon whipped its tail now. All of a sudden, I figured that out, you know. I wasn't near as dumb as I was the day before. I couldn't believe it. He told me that little rock started it. And I couldn't believe it, you know. I in my mind, that just doesn't seem right, that you can start an earthquake throwing a little rock about that big, you know. And he knew it was coming. I didn't have a clue, you know. I was just shocked, so I couldn't hardly wait to ask him. I already knew. I already knew, but I had to ask him anyway to make sure I wasn't off on some fairy tale, you know. He just rocked his head, you know. That kind of stuff it affects you. You never get away. You never lose remembrance of that, you know. And it was different, I can tell you right now, because I was having trouble putting all that together. You know, I was telling you about the dog this morning that he told me that wasn't my best dog. And his name was Eli, my one he liked. And he was right, and as I got to studying, it didn't take very long until I realized he was quite a bit better. But anyway, he told me not to sell the dog. And I said, because some lion hunters, they get, it's kind of a poor way to make a living, and sometimes you get offered a lot of money for those dogs, and you have a temptation to sell it. Oh, you get the fat, you get attached to them, but then too you got to eat, and sometimes you'll sell them, and you don't want to, but like nowadays they're $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, so you get one that's, and you get a little bit broke, you might part with one, just pat him and say, well, it's been nice, But anyway, I promised him I wouldn't sell this dog, and they weren't that high at that time. But anyway, I told him no, I wouldn't sell him, and I really liked the dog a lot. And I got more attached, and he became by far my best dog. And I don't know, I still trained him with that other dog, and the other dog was still okay. He was decent, but I just hadn't sorted it out until Brother Branham pointed it out. But I want to tell you something, and I'm not one, I think the term Brother Branham uses is I'm not given to illusions, but I want to tell you what happened to this dog. Well, I don't know what happened to the dog, but I'll tell you the story. He was getting old, and I would go see him every day, and I was living out of Show Low, about 40 miles at the time, and I was hunting Fort Apache, and the old dog was too old to go, and I just kept him around out of sentiment, and he was getting kind of arthritic, and he was filmy-eyed and stuff, but every day I didn't even make him work. I mean, he just had a free ride, and so every day I'd go to him first, see if he died, because it'd be cold, and so we got a fresh blanket of snow over everything. About midnight, I knew it had snowed about midnight, because if it snows early, a lion hunter loves it. But if it snows at daylight, it messes you up, because lions won't be walking. So those early snows are what you like. And so I always get up several times and see if it snow, what time it quit, and so on. And so it quit about midnight, and I went over. And Eli, there was he hadn't come out. He didn't come out of his box. There was no tracks. And the chain was going in and up, and I had a piece of carpeting over the door. And the chain went in there, and there was no tracks. So I'd fed and watered all my dogs and was going to go ahead and get ready to leave. And I yelled at Eli, and he didn't come out. I went over there, and he was gone. And there was no tracks. And he just was gone. And I never knew really what happened, but he never died. And if he had left, I would have seen the tracks. And he didn't leave, and he wasn't there, and he never showed up for a couple of years. See, it's just funny. He just left, He was just gone one day. So I didn't have to bury that dog, but I kept him until he was old. One day, the gentleman I mentioned, some of you may know him or may not, that I was dove hunting with, and that had told me he wasn't going to quit dove hunting. And he knew me pretty well, and he knew I wasn't a Christian. And one day he was sitting in the Ramada, down about the first third of the seats, and he called my name that day, and he called me Brother Dawson. And I'll be honest with you, it hurt my conscience when I heard him say that. I'll tell you that it kind of bothered me. So I purposed in my heart I was going to go to him and tell him not to call me that anymore. And so Bob, I didn't know that Bob had the same thought. And he told me later what he thought, because I didn't know this happened. I heard Brother Branham say it, and I didn't know what he meant. Bob said, Brother Dawson, he don't know him like I do. That's what he told me he thought. Brother Branham stopped, pointed his finger at him, and he said, I caught that. He came running up to me after church, And he said, forgive me. I said, for what? You don't owe me a He said, oh, man, I thought, yeah, I do. You forgive me. When he called you brother, I was critical in my heart. And he pointed at me real stern and told me, I caught that. And I said, well, you don't have to worry about me. I think you're right. I'm not a very good brother. So you didn't offend me. He said, well, I want you to forgive me. I said, fine. So when Brother Branham, I saw him, I don't remember how soon before I saw him again, a few days probably, or a month, 2 weeks, I don't know. Whenever he called me again, and we went, I said, you know, we were sitting down, and he said, what's bothering you? I said, well, I'll tell you what's bothering me over there. You called me brother. He said, well, Dawson, don't you tell me who to call brother. So I didn't. And then Bob, you know, I didn't tell you the rest. He came up to me and he said, well, I want you to forgive me, and I've been thinking, I don't think I better shoot any more of those doves. I said, that's probably a good deal. It was 2 years later. He said, I think I'm not going to shoot any more of those doves. So anyway, he quit. Yeah. Let me tell you about this truck. I had a brand new Chevy truck. I think it was a 65. And it was really a nice truck, you know, V8 and 4-speed and everything. And so Brother Branham told me he's looking for him a Saguaro for the front of the den at the Circle Drive. I said, I find them all the time that we have to get rid of, and because they were starting to get a little sticky about just taking them anywhere. I said, I'll find you one. And so they were building a school over at the little town of the Kennicott Copper owns it over there by Ray. I forgot the name of it. It starts with an S. Not Superior, but down by Ray. Anyway, the next little town. And then we were building a school in there, and I was doing some dozer work, and there was a beautiful saguaro. I said, oh, that's got to go to Brother Branham. So I got this dozer, and I dug up and got under it. And if you do it just right, you can lay them over real soft. If you take the root ball and take some more dirt, and I laid it over real tender. And the only thing it was over them the desert. And real bad rocks. I mean, I says, oh, you guys, come on, let's get me a truck to it. And I said, no. I said, well, I'll do it. So I just hooked onto that trailer with my brand new truck. It was about a week old. And I took it up to that saguaro, and I took the dozer to the side and shoved this saguaro on this big trailer. Well, when I put it, I shoved my truck into a big old rock, and this brand new, it was on the right door. And I would never fix it because I liked it. Because I knew what I was doing when I did it. I kept that truck till it was old, and I never fixed the door. And my mother fussed at me all the time. When are you going to fix it? I said, I'm never going to fix it. But anyway, I could have bought him one from the nursery because it was so heavy. It broke all the tires on my trailer. I had to buy all new tires. And if I'd have fixed my truck and bought new tires, I could have just bought him one. You know, but anyway, it's up there in front of his house. I never fixed that car. You know, I want to read some of these things that about being with him. How are we on time? We all right? So, anyway, you know, he asked me several times some real pointed personal questions. And I'll be quite frank, I would have rather not answered them. I really wouldn't. But one thing I did, look him in the eye and told him exactly the right answer, because I knew better than not to. And I didn't always know why he asked me. sometimes I wondered if he just asked me if I was going to answer. It would be embarrassing. And I answered him straight. And I was always thankful of that, but, you know, I don't know exactly why he did. Because some of them would have been a lot easier not to answer, you know, or you know, just, that's just truth. I would have rather not. But I did every time, and I'm glad I did. But, you know, I don't know how to describe some of the things that, how he was, but I'll just put some notes here that he had a very good sense of humor. Now, he did, a lot of people might not think, but he did like to laugh, and he did laugh a lot. Once he got rested from the stress of the meetings, the first couple of days he wound up pretty good, and he didn't, of course, but as soon as he got relaxed, he did like to laugh. He had a very good sense of humor, and he had a lot of funny stories, and he'd laugh hard. He liked to belly laugh, you know, and of course he didn't have to worry about me helping him, you know, and so he was really a lot of fun. And several things that I noticed, you know, he always helpful. He was very helpful. I don't care what I was doing. I had never been around anybody, especially preachers, that help you, you know. They want to be waited on, you know, and they want somebody to coddle them, you know. I mean, he worked hard. I mean, he would do chores. He would do things that embarrassed me. He'd carry water for my dogs. I mean, he would drag up wood to the campfire. I mean, you know, very helpful. I mean, he just did part of the chores. When you were out there camping, he did half the work, at least, and he did it very, not grudgingly, you know, freely. And he was very helpful, and that struck me. I mean, you know, I watched a lot of people. Of course, clients, they pay me to do it. I'm not don't get me wrong, you don't expect clients to do it. That's not what they're out there for. But I'm talking about when you take brothers, you know, and they're not even paying. You know, they're still letting you help them out, you know. And I was very striking to me about how helpful that Brother Branham was, and very thoughtful of those type of things. And he seemed to be always at the right place at the right time. And that was striking to me on many occasions, you know. And he wasn't too big to do something menial. I mean, that's what I loved it. He was... in my opinion, he was big enough to do something menial, you know. But he was very respectful of women, even unsaved women. He was careful. He doffed his hat. He took his hat off. He wouldn't have his hat on talking to a woman. He would take it off. And he tried to be respectful. And that was a lot of the older people remember when that was common. He would stand up when a woman came in the room. He didn't just sit and let them hunt a seat. He was very respectful. And, you know, they didn't have to be sisters either. He was just that was one thing that I noticed. He was always kind and respectful to women. The reason you know the reason I said it. But a lot of people think in their message they got to be a little bit tough. You got to be a little tough with the woman, you know. Some people think that, and you know, there's nothing further from the truth, you know. But anyway, he didn't show us that example, you know. And he was always a gentleman. I don't care who he was, in what case. He was always. I considered him a consummate gentleman at all times. And here he was uneducated, but he had very educated actions. He had a lot of class because he was a gentleman. He was kind and considerate. And sometimes he could be stern, but the sternness was in very serious matters. He was unyielding. He was unyielding in serious matters. I mean, there was no, you know, he had courage to speak his mind. Of course, that's not a question. We know that, but he didn't. He wasn't pushy with it, but he could be stern, and he wasn't jovial. He knew when to laugh, and he knew when to be stern, and he didn't mix them. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. There were times then he didn't do the hard laughing because he was in a serious subject. He was funny, and he imitated people pretty good. You know, some people he could imitate real good, and he voices and the way they talked. He could imitate Welsh Evans perfect. You know, I mean, he could talk real Southern if he wanted to, and it was pretty funny. But he did cut up quite a bit, and he didn't mind a practical joke pulled on him once in a while. You know, one time I remember this. In fact, some brothers were all camped at it was Javelina season, and you know, it got out of hand pretty soon. There's 60, 80, 90 guys down there, and they just messed it up. But anyway, they found out where he was camping, so a bunch of people showed up. Well, I remember David Woods. Well, you know, I didn't get concerned about David Woods. For those who don't know that, you hear him talk about his best friend, Banks Wood. Well, David's his son that got healed with the polio, but David's a big lad, you know, now. But at that time, he was a youngster, and he really liked to pull jokes. Well, he did a bunch of things to Brother Branham, and the brothers got offended. And they didn't realize that's his next-door neighbor. He grew up with him, and he could pull those tricks that they would or not do and get by with it, you know, like putting lizards in his bed and short-sheeting his bed and all that stuff. He did that kind of stuff and just laughed, and they were offended by it. But see, he had enough humor that he wasn't offended by it. And, you know, he said, David, I'll get you back. And David says, oh, man, I'm worried. You know, I don't know. Because he told me, he said, I'm going to get you back with those tricks. But he took it very good, you know. And I want to say this about him that I noticed in every occasion. He always left some sort of a testimony with a stranger. And he told me once, he said, now, that woman, the only thing I could tell her is that I was a minister, because she wouldn't let me tell her anything else. But yet, he told me this way. He said, as long as you don't feel the rejection, you can go. When they start pushing you back or rejecting it, then you leave it alone, and that's as far as you can go. He said, but as long as they're receiving it, you can go as long as they'll let you go. And that was real important to me, because sometimes we don't know what to do in witnessing to people. And you've seen people abuse that so badly. They just hammer them, and they want to save them, you know, and they want to show them. They want it for them so bad, and the people don't even want it. And he told me once, he said, you can't help people if they don't know they need help. And so he said sometimes, but I did notice that no matter how he left a stranger, there was some sort of witness there. If it was nothing but I am a minister, or sometimes the Lord allows me to see things, or sometimes people are healed in my meetings, we'd like to invite you out, that sort of thing. And then some of them that it just might be a little reprimand in their life. And I'd seen him do that, but he got by with it. He knew when to do it and when how. But that was striking to me, that he did try to witness in some form every time. And that was a common thing. I pretty much saw it. And I think I have an instant in here in my notes about that, because I was almost worried. I was worried about some real hard gentlemen that I knew. Okay, here it is. I'm going to read this, so I wrote it out. Well, once he testified to a game biologist, this was in Utah, and a game warden and a government hunter. And they had told Jerry they didn't like preachers, and they probably wasn't going to like this guy. And so he told me, he said, you go up front with the dogs. I've got something I want to tell these guys. I says, okay. So I moved up front, and he's talking to these guys, and I couldn't hear it because I did what he asked me to do. But I looked back, and they were all three crying. And he told me later that he led them to the Lord. I never saw two of them again. But the biologist, and they were doing a turkey transplant, And I never saw them again because they were guys from somewhere else. He said I led them to the Lord. And I did see all of them crying, and they all were kneeling in the trail. I didn't get to hear any of it, but he didn't want me to embarrass them. And so I went right on like he told me to do. I did what he told me because he was a reason, or he would have let me be there. And so, you know, I was worried that they were going to be nasty to him because they told Jerry they didn't like preachers. You see what I mean? And they said they had already made up their mind. Jerry said, no, you've got to hear this guy. He's different than any you ever saw. So Jerry, who done told me not to bring a preacher around, is telling he's going out and getting converts, you know. The Jack Mormon, you know. Anyway. And then Jerry, you know, right after that, I didn't see the other guys, and Jerry, he told me, he said, you know, he said, Bill, that was his brother-in-law. The biologist was his brother-in-law, by the way, and he said, you know, he's always asking for Bill. He said, can you get me his address? He wants to talk to him again. I said, you bet, I will. So I got him the Jeffersonville address. But anyway, he told me numerous times that he had asked for him. And then Jerry told me several times after the accident that he missed Bill. Told me that several times. He said, I really miss your friend Bill. And so, you know, sometimes we don't know how deep it ran, you know. Sometimes it looks like it's frivolous. Sometimes you don't think it's sinking in. It may have a seed planted, you know. I want to leave you, I'm going to just give you one more, and then I'm going to leave you with this one. And because this one was different than anything I'd ever encountered with him, and was somewhat surprising. Jerry and I, this government hunter, he and I had a little training device that we used to train lion hound pups. We had captured a live lion, and we kept it in a milk barn way out in the country because it's illegal to have them. And it's illegal to do what we were doing, but we could really train lion dogs. We would take this lion and had a rebar front on it, and I could pull the rope and let our pups watch this lion run off. Then we'd dump our pups out, and they'd chase this lion till he treed. And then we would tie our pups up, and I'd get up there and jerk this lion out and go to another tree and turn him loose and let him trail him again. Then we'd go tie him up again, take him back home. Well, we'd been doing that, and we didn't tell anybody. It was just our solemn secret because we didn't want the other lion hunters knowing we had it because they'd be wanting to, and then pretty soon they'd tell somebody else, their brother-in-law, and then pretty soon you're in trouble. So we had a pact. Nobody knows, okay? Nobody knows our secret. So I'm riding along in the pickup with Brother Branham, and he gets this real funny look on his face, and he says, you know, I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine, how he trains lion dogs. And he describes our setup to a T, and he says, it's got this little rebar on it, and they pull the rope. He said, it works real good. You might want to try it.
Thank you, Brother Dawson. That's the life of Christ that you witnessed with the mighty man of God in our day. And that's the life I want to emanate. And we can all start by respecting one another more, especially the household of faith and everyone. And so everything Brother Dawson said is true. So many times he'd take his hat off, especially if a woman was with you. Many times he's even pulled his hat off when he talked to me, and he'd take his hat off. And you know, I didn't know what he was doing then, but have you ever been riding along and you feel the presence of the Lord? What's the first thing you do? Many times now I pull my hat off when I feel that presence of the Lord, lay it on the dash and different things like that. And I finally, as I got older, I figured what Brother Branham was doing. That presence of the Lord was coming, and he was respecting it by taking his hat off. And like when we walk through the sanctuary, what do? We pull our hats off to respect the Lord and different things like that. So we can never go wrong respecting and loving one another. And that quote that I read to the church, how God is so patient with us not to call our failures out, and deals so patiently with us. And he says he knows how to encourage us in the right things and discourage us in the wrong things. And he said, this is the way to handle the church and the way to handle our families. And what wisdom of God has been left us in the message of the hour. And what Brother Dawson said about humor, Brother Branham loved humor, because when we hunted with him, he had us laughing and rolling, and he could imitate anybody if he wanted to talk like him. And then when he got all done, and he said, brother, he says, God loves humor. He said he hates smut. And so he was a real man's man, a real godly man. And I thank God for these living testimonies that we have. And I see that in his people today. I see that same characteristic of Christ in the bride today. And so I'm happy Brother Dawson came to be with us. I believe his steps were instructed of the Lord. And it's so encouraging to have someone come and back up everything that you've ever experienced from another angle, another direction, but it was all the same God. And I can truly say, all the times that I was with Brother Branham, the thoughts never entered my mind that he was God. The thoughts crossed me, I'm so close to God. I feel so close to God. I'm in a presence that I've never been in before. And when I left him, you felt so much closer to Jesus Christ. You didn't feel like you was Brother Branham's bosom buddy, but you felt close to Jesus Christ. And that's what we need more in our lives, each one of us. Every time we leave somebody, leave them feeling like they're closer to Christ than they've ever been. And so we thank God for this example that we've had in this day and age. And that same spirit, the bride, we'll see, the prophet, the bride, and the spirit will all be saying the same thing, having the same nature and everything. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. It's just been, it's like salve rubbed over your life. And so I'd like Donald to come lead us in a song. And remember Brother Dawson, his family, and what he does. And now you've got a real friend that you can pray for, and he can pray for all of us, okay? So Donald, if you'll just come lead us in some songs, and then we'll close. God bless you. Thank you for being so lovely and patient. But how could you not enjoy it? Amen.